My name is Mark Spevick. I'm the head of 3D and course leader here at Escape Studios. And I'm going to be taking you through Houdini 18.5 and particularly the new Pyro tools that are in there, because there's some really interesting changes that they've made in the new version. So I'm going to actually stop my webcam because it's quite processor intensive, and it'll actually slow down my computer. But I don't know if you're following along, but if you are, I'll go a little slow just in case. So in Houdini 18.5 now, we've got some really interesting new Pyro tools. They're based around the Sparse Pyro solver. So traditionally, we had two Pyro solvers, a dense. We had one Pyro solver, a dense one, which is a big container that resized, and then the sparse one doesn't resize, but it just uses voxels where you need them. And voxels are the little containers where a simulation is processed, and the more voxels you have, the slower it'll be to process, and the longer it'll take. So voxels can be thought of like the pixels, the resolution of the simulation. So the sparse is more efficient, but there's been some good changes to the sparse solver, which I want to talk about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build it from scratch so we can see the new features. I'm going to start with a geometry node. So if we dive inside, I'm just going to lay in a circle. I'm going to use the circle to source my the start of my Pyro. So I'm just going to lay it down on the y-axis here and just scale it up a little bit. Now, traditionally, when we've done Pyro in industry and stuff, we use particles to shoot off, and then we use those particles to source how the flame should look. That way we can really control the shape and the explosion and stuff like that. So in 18.5, they've now built in a whole suite of tools that most of us have often built many times ourselves, which is pretty handy because you can either build it yourself or you can use the built-in one now. So the built-in one is in the Pyro shelf here, and it's called the Pyro Burst Source. So if I just plug that in, I'll give you a quick tour of the features of it. Oh, before I do that, actually, let me just scatter some points into that circle. That's the important thing, because we're going to source from points. So let me just scatter some. Oh, that's going to take forever. I'm going to scatter one point in there. Oh, let me just turn that off and on. There we go. My display is not updating correctly. Let me go to here, scene view, and we'll see that better again. Oh, sorry, 1 point. There we go. I didn't type the one in there. So, yeah, there we go. I've got 1 point, a single point here, and that's going to be the source for this Pyro burst source. There we go. So what you can see, it's creating this particle explosion from where that single point is. And as I move through the slider, you'll see it grows and shrinks again. Let me bring this down to something like 70 frames, because we're going to have quite a short burst. So what this is like a particle thing. If I go through a few frames, you'll see it gets bigger like this. And this is sourcing particle attributes for us. The attributes it's sourcing is temperature and burn. And these are the things that are going to, and velocity as well, V. So these are the things that are going to source our Pyro. We're going to get burn and then temperature, and that's going to create a foundation of our fire. And you'll see we're going to get an explosion off in these many directions. And this will give us great control. So let's have a look at how we can control this for a minute, and then we'll plug it in further, and I'll show you a quick way we can get something looking very, very cool. So there's a multitude of tabs here. First of all, you've got a proxy shape, so you can see the kind of shape it's creating. That's not that useful, really. What's useful is these little spiky things. So first of all, we can adjust the overall scale of it, make it bigger or smaller, or we can change the direction. I could have it go off in the X like this, and then it sort of shoots out sideways, which is a bit odd. Let's have it up in the Y. And we can change the spread angle. We can have it totally go upwards or spread out. And then you'll notice they've all got this button here where you can create some variation. So for example, on the spread angle here, we've only got one actually, so we're not going to see much variation at the minute. What we'll do is we'll come down, we'll look at that in a minute. Actually, no, actually, I'm going to scatter 3 points in there. Let's put 3 points so we can see 3 different explosions. So yeah, what you can do is, to demonstrate this set varying, if I choose that, that's probably not the best one to do it on. Let's do set uniform. So let's do it on the spread angle, set varying. If I choose set varying, we get a variation between these angles. So at the moment, it's 90 degrees plus or minus 15 degrees. If I put something like 45 or even 0, you'll see that some are much flatter than others. That's not looking that different, is it really? Let's try the variation in something else. Let's try an initial size. So here we go. We'll have one between sort of 0 and 1. Or we'll have a variation of 1. So it's 1 plus or minus 1. So we'll either get some at 2 or we'll get some at 0. And you'll see a bigger change here. So maybe if we put 2 and 2, actually 1 and 1 will do it. So you can add lots of variation like this. And there's more control, which I'll show you in a sec, if you just didn't want to add some randomness like that. Let's put this back to, yeah, let's leave that on 3 points for now. So the other thing is you can have a look at the trailings. If I bring this down to 1, you'll see each one of these produces a trail, and that's what the trail looks like. It's a cone of these points. You can make the points closer together by dropping the trail separation down, but generally that's not a great idea. There's enough resolution here. But if you want more intricate detail, you can add it there. We also have this trailing length, so we can shorten the trails and lengthen them. There is a tool for making jet blasts and trailing things, so I wouldn't really use this again for that. And we can make these thicker and smaller. So we can have a really spiky explosion or a really blobby one if you want. Let's put that back to 250. Again, there's a bigger control for the blobbiness of it here, and this is the roundness. If I bring that down, you'll see it's really spiky. If I bring up the roundness, you'll see it's much more round, really. So you can kind of adjust the spikiness here as well as adjusting the trailing thickness. That makes it spiky or rounder, more round as well too. The interesting one here is the start frame. We can actually offset it so it doesn't start on frame 1. So 1, 2, 3, and off they go. And you'll see they actually last for about 5 frames. If you want your explosion quicker, you can maybe make it 3 frames and they pop in quicker. If I just click on the clock icon down here, then when I press play, I see it more in real time. In fact, if you want to see the FPS down here, you can hit D for display. And if you go to guides, you can turn on draw time, and you'll see the FPS stats down the bottom there. So it's limiting it at 24 for me at the minute. Now, what's nice about this start frame is you can run it from attributes. We've seen the set varying, but most of these you can also run from attributes. Let's choose use attribute. And what you can do, if you're using attribute, you can click on this magic dice button and it will set it up for you. It creates a new node here called a attribute adjust float, and it's created an attribute called start frame. If you hold your cursor over the word start frame, you'll see that's the attribute it needs, start frame. So here's our numbers. If we right click and bring up a spreadsheet, we'll see there's our attribute. It says 3, 3, and 4. If I change the seed value, I can get that to something interesting like 4, 5, and 6. And we can change the range here. This is going to start at the minimum value, so it's going to start at least 3, and then plus 3 rather. So anything from 3 to 6 I'm going to get. Let me maybe put 7 in there so it's a bit bigger. 4 in there so it's a bit bigger. So that's between 3 and 7 now. So that 5, 6, and 7 is still the same really. But you can make the range a bit bigger if you want. So the result of that is this is going to now, if you step forwards, we'll see one on we'll see one starts on frame 5, the next one on 6, and the next one on 7. Let me go back to the why are they getting so big there? 1, 2, 3. You'll see they're offset in time like that, which is kind of cool. That's fine as well. So we can do more interesting effects with that. So say you were to make a line, for example, and I'm going to put the line along the x-axis. Let's maybe make it 5 in length, and then we'll do minus 2.5 to offset it to the origin here. So there's my line, and I'm going to put maybe 6 points on there, and I'm just going to create an attribute. Let's use a point wrangle for this. We know it's an integer, and it's called start frame. And then what we're going to say is the point number at ptnum plus 3. So the first one will be at 3, then we'll have 4, 5, 6. They'll have sequential numbers along here. If I look in my spreadsheet, you'll see we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So if I just plug that into the Pyro source now and press play, you'll see we get this boom, 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 carpet bombing type effect where it goes left to right along the curve there. Let's maybe make that a bit longer. So we get this effect. Maybe a bit longer again. There you go. So it's like sparking along like that. And of course, if I actually plug the circle in, let's make that a bit bigger, then we'll see it will go around the circle because of the points, like that. So we can create all sorts of interesting fireworky effects. Let's do a carpet bomb, maybe like that. We can swap those over later. In fact, let me put a switch node in. I'll put a switch node in for that mode. And I'll put another switch node in to swap the circle around for the line. Let's have that on a line for a minute. And this one on the right-hand branch for a minute. There we go. So we've got our line. So once you've, oh yeah, that's right. We haven't finished talking about this really. Let's get some points in there. So we've also got outward expansion. You'll see we can make it expand outwards and inwards. And directional expansion, this kind of gives it a puffiness in the direction it's facing. So I'm going to put a value of 2 so it explodes a bit further outwards. And we can control that expansion here over time. So as it gets bigger, it expands upwards. It's a bit hard to see when they're all moving. Let me set this to 1 point, and then we'll just see the 1 point do its thing. Oh, you can have you need at least 2 points on a curve, but we'll have a look at this one. So you'll see it grows over time. That's what this ramp controls. So that I could have it stay really small and only get big at the very last minute. So now you'll see it grows quite slowly, grows a lot slower over those 3 frames. Probably need more frames to get more fidelity out of that. There we go. You can control the ramp and get some interesting effects out of that. Let me revert that back to defaults. Now, the interesting thing here is the burst components. This is what's sourcing these attributes for us, this burn and this temperature, and that's what's going to control the sim in the end. And we can visualize those here. At the moment, you'll see we have 2 tabs, one for burn, one for temperature. We can turn off the temperature and just see the burn. And you'll see they come in different colors, actually. The temperature is blue and the burn is yellow. So let's have a look at the burn. And there's some things we can do to this. At the moment, that's uniform everywhere, which won't give us such a nice effect. It's great to add some noise to this and break it up. So we can do that. We can add some noise. And you'll see the black is 0 value. So this is really patchy. I'm actually going to bring the amplitude down to 0.5 so we don't get such contrast there. So we've got some low values of burn and some high values. And we can change the scale here and adjust the noise pattern, sort of break it up more if you want. So we can leave it something like that. We can also choose scale over duration, which means it starts off bright and you'll see it fades off to black over the period that it grows. So it burns really brightly and then all the fuel gets used up. And you can control that again with the ramp by adjusting the ramp here. So let's go to the end frame so you can make it die off quicker or slower, however you want. And let's turn that off for a sec. And also scale along trailing. So it's hot in the middle here and it fades off as it shoots up in the air. So it kind of burns up based on its length too. These are good to turn on together. You get a really nice sort of natural noise pattern that can help really drive your explosion. So these are great things to mess around with. So don't forget to turn back on your temperature. I'm going to keep it uniform temperature everywhere, but it's the burn that's going to actually create the flames for us. But we could add noise if we wanted to as well. And then in output components here, we can add some extra velocity. I just turn on the velocity display here. So you see it just adds extra velocity to the directional velocity, basically noise, and we can make that noise bigger and smaller just to create some more initial turbulence. The more interesting source you have for your explosion, the better things are going to be. Let me put 6 points back on so we have our little carpet bombing effect there. Let's save because that's always important. Always very important. So what do you do with that now you've got your interesting burst source? And obviously, once you start adding your pyro, you can come back and tweak all this. Well, fortunately, on this new node, they've got a nice feature where it sets up stuff for you. If you come to the right here, we have quick setups. The initialize basically just sets up some of these attributes for you. It's better if you kind of drive that yourself. But the quick setup is useful because you can do stuff with this node. If you made the node on your own, you could create a single input point. So it'd make that 1 point for you. But what I'm going to do actually is the Pyro simulation. It's going to make all the extra nodes that I need to get a simulation running. So let's click on that. And you'll see it's created 2 nodes for us. The first one here is this volume rasterize attribute. If I turn that on, this creates volumes, which are actually going to be what sources our Pyro. And you'll see it's all connected here for you down to the simulation there, and also here up to the attributes that we have. So if we add more attributes, this will automatically create the right volumes for you. So this is really handy. You don't need to adjust very much here. And let's go to the Pyro solver node. So this saves us having to go inside a proper DOP network. It's built everything in SOPs for us. It is a DOP network. You can go inside and see DOPs if you want to, but most of everything you need is actually out here. And it's got some great new features. So if I press play, we'll see we get a sparse solve by default. And there you go, we get our little carpet bomb explosion, and it's a little slow, which is fine. And we've got to do some finessing to get that to look good. Now, there's a really fantastic new feature of 18.5, which really will help us speed up our look development. Because the problem with high-res simulations, I mean, if I put the resolution here down to say, let's try 0.09, it was on 0.2, so reasonable res. You'll see it goes really, really slow. So to do lots of iterations and see lots of play blasts or flipbooks for feedback is going to take me quite a while. So this new feature can really, really help. If we go to the Solving tab Advanced, and we have this, it's called the Minimal OpenCL Solve. Now, this isn't designed to finish your work. This is just designed so you can work quickly and get a good look going, and then you turn this off and do a proper solve overnight with all the correct data. So here's what it says on the tin, it's minimal. So it's cutting out, doing a lot of tricks so it can play quickly. But the advantage is you can change a lot of these settings live, and you'll see the updates happening in real time, hopefully, or close depending on your hardware, or at least a lot faster than you did. So your iteration times really go down, and you can get your look working very, very fast. So let's have a little look at how we can do that. So the first thing we want to know is when we turn that on. Did I turn that on? Advanced, yep, there we go. So when you press play, you'll see it's a lot faster. I haven't changed the resolution. You'll also see it doesn't resize. So because the way it works is it's loading only the data it needs it into the GPU. And you'll see it's not sparse, it's not resizing. A lot of these things you can't adjust. You can't adjust, for example, on the simulation tab here, the advection, which is really nice. But anyway, it's very, very quick. So the first thing you need to do really is adjust the maximum size here. Let me put something like 15, 30, 15, because this is going to be quite big, I think. And I'm going to say closed below the y-axis. So it fits the box sort of on the y-axis like this. And I'm assuming that's going to be the biggest that my sim's going to be. If you get memory errors, because your GPU runs out of RAM, just decrease the size or increase the voxel size and work with the res you can get. And you'll see that's a lot faster for the resolution, for the same resolution that we were doing before than the sparse solve. And my GPU's not very, very fast, and I'm also broadcasting at the same time. Let me just increase that in the x-axis for my line. And there we go. So we get that going up. And can we see our flames shooting up. So there's another thing you want to be concerned about if you're doing animating sources. In the sourcing tab here, you'll see we have this frame range. This is for the minimal solve. Now it has to load all the data into the first frame. So what it does is if you've got a changing source or a collision, it has to load enough of that in that you'll see it. So at the moment I'm loading in 12 frames. Remember, I'm doing frames 1 to 6 here on my line. So we're seeing everything. If I do just from frame 1 to 1, I'll only see the first frame loaded in. And we start at frame 3, so we're missing it. So if I load frame 1 to 3, we'll get frame 3 in, which is just literally the first little bit of the explosion. So if I do frame 5, we'll see a bit more of it. And if I do obviously 12, we'll load the whole line in. And you can also cycle that data. That's what this cycle length is. So you can get it to loop. So if I put 30 in, every 30 frames, it's going to rerun that 12 frame source that it's cached up on the first frame. So look, at frame 30, we'll get another zip of the line. So we can quickly see lots of repetitions and start to fine tune stuff. Now, if you want to do it properly interactive, you should go to the edit menu here and turn on live parameter during playback. So as you change stuff, you'll see it update automatically. Some of the things like resolution changes, you'll have to wait till it goes back to the first frame, but let's try this out. So if I go to the solving tab here, first of all, I can bring the time scale down, and that'll just make the whole solve go a little bit slower to give it more sort of scale. Obviously, if I increase the resolution for a moment, it will go a little quicker. Now I have to go back to frame 1 for that to recache up. And there you go, it's already going faster. We're getting nearly 5 FPS. So if you've got a really good graphics card, you'll get, you know, almost real-time playback in some cases. So here on the solving tab, let's make it cool down a little quicker. So it won't go up so much. Just so the cooldown, they don't rise up so much. And we've got things like this. We've got the buoyancy scale. Obviously, if you make it less buoyant, it won't rise up as much either. So that one's not very buoyant. But if we give it something like 1 on frame, there you go, already the buoyancy is kicking in. So the next one will be a lot more buoyant and rise up a lot faster. So 0.5 was good. I want it to hang around a little bit, go out and produce lots of smoke. The ambient temperature is the air temperature, but the reference temp is how hot it gets. If you make this something like 5,000, wait for the next explosion, it will get really hot. And a lot more heat means it will rise a lot quicker. So we've produced a lot more heat there. Let's put 10 in this one. So it goes up a little further, and this one should be a lot hotter. There we go, see, it rises a lot faster because there's a lot more heat in it. Let's put that back to the default of 3,000. Next, we have this flames tab, which is quite fun. The flame lifespan is how long they last. So if I bring that right down, the flames will sort of disappear a lot quicker. As you see, they evaporate off a lot faster. And let's put something like 2.5 in there. So kind of zip off quickly. The reason I want them to zip off quickly is because I want to emit smoke here. There we go. Suddenly we kick the smoke in. And the smoke here is being emitted from this flame range when the flame is between the temperatures 0.8 and 0.1 when it's cooling down. If I put this a lot higher, it'll only emit smoke from when it's really hot. And if we bring it down, it will only emit it from when it's really cool. So if we do 0 and something like 0.1, now it's using this ramp. So between 0 and 0.1, we're using this ramp. So at 0.05, for example, we're getting the maximum, and then at 0 and at 1, we're getting very little. So kind of, you can ramp it in like that. Let's put that back to 0.8 and 0.3 or something. And obviously you can adjust the emission amount here. Don't worry about the shading. We'll make the shading look good later. The trick with Pyro is to make it move the way you want and then adjust the shading later. So they're getting a nice sort of heavy rolling explosion here. So the temperature, again, we can give it a lot more temperature throughout the Pyro. So it creates a lot more temperature inside itself. And you'll see it rises a lot quicker as it starts to heat up in here. And you get this really fluffy look. Let's bring that right down. And you'll see how reactive it is when I do this. And the last thing you can mess with is expansion. Put a big expansion in there, and that will get it to expand outwards. This produces the gas. So look, it really goes a bit nuts there. So you want to be a bit careful with that one. So yeah, totally filled up the whole space. So a little bit subtle use of expansion. You can get a really nice. Let me just reset that because it's filling up with stuff. Now, the important one here is shape. Let's turn these off for a second. We can see what those do. Now, actually, while we've got some smoke in here, let's start. Since we're dealing with the shape, we want us to make this look a bit better. So there's some tricks you need to do to make this look better in the viewport. If you hold your cursor here and tap D for the display, you can go to things like the geometry tab here and turn on the volume quality to be high. That always helps a little bit. In the scene here, you can turn up the anti-aliasing. That's not going to help too much for the volumes. But in lights here, we want to see high quality lighting. We want to add a light in a moment to obviously take advantage of that. And then in material here, transparency, set that to high quality. And the most important button is here in texture. Houdini's display is limiting the resolution here. So if you put really high res, you won't see the detail in your viewport. So turn this off. Don't let it limit the 3D res, and you'll see beautiful resolution in your viewport. The last thing you need to do is add a light to stop it looking so flat, and we can see the contrast in our detail. So let me go up here and control click on a spotlight, for example. And there we go. Suddenly you'll see we get some really nice lighting in the viewport. We can see the detail in the smoke there. What I might do is actually pick a nice angle like this and just drop a camera in. So interestingly, that messes up the aperture. Let's put 24.89, which is similar to a professional camera. And if I was here, I'd probably use a 120mm lens, which means I'm not standing very close. I'm standing far away, which is quite wise if you've got a big explosion. So let me just now reframe that. So look like we're looking through a telephoto lens. So let's try 100. It's a bit wide, a bit long. There you go. So we're like up in a helicopter looking down at an explosion here, shooting across in a line. Let me adjust my light, look through light. Let's bring the light around a bit over here. Let's look back through the camera. There you go, that'll do. So we have our explosion there. Let's put a ground in there while we're at it. Something like this. I'm kind of looking down on our explosion like that. Let's go back inside our network and keep working on this. Let's get back. I've unlocked my camera, so that's good. So we can see much more detail on our, let's play again and save, obviously, because that's a bit dangerous if you don't. You can start to see a bit more detail on what's going on here. So the dissipation is how quick the smoke fades off with time. If I put that up high, you'll see everything dissipates or fades off really quickly. If you tap Y, by the way, you can stop ghosting the other geometry there. So if I put the dissipation down quite low, that smoke's going to hang around for a long time. And I kind of want that. And you'll see it's got this really blobby look now. To avoid the blobby look is that we mess up with the velocity field, and that's what these guys do. They're basically applying filters to the velocity field. So let's turn to disturbance on. As soon as you see we turn disturbance on, we disturb the velocity field and we get this lovely noise, excuse me, that gives us all that lovely detail. And you can control that with this tab here. It's using the density field. And when the density gets below this value, it's creating noise of this scale. If I put a bigger block size in, you'll see much bigger noise scales here. So it's much more rolly. See the different sort of swirliness, depends what you want. Now the block size is in scene scale, so that's 20 centimeters. My voxels are set to 10 centimeters. You must always make sure your voxels are smaller than your noise, otherwise you'll cause artifacts. And the noise is being driven by the speed field. In simulation here, we're calculating a speed field. And here we're using it to control this. So at the moment, at 0 speed, we're not getting any disturbance. And when it's at 2, we're getting maximum disturbance. And anything above 2 speed, we're getting loads of disturbance. So it's slowing it down over time. We can actually remap this. If I actually bring, oh, let me just, this doesn't like being adjusted while it's live. So let me do something like this. So it's only having maximum disturbance above a value of 1. Anything below 1 and 0, there's no disturbance. And this stops it when it's hanging in the air for looking too crunchy. It kind of just fades off a bit, which is what you want. You know, we don't get that over crunchiness. There is another method we can do with this. We can use continuous. Again, being faded by speed. And this gives us a nice effect. This adds really small, high frequency detail. So if you want to get a bit advanced, there you go. See really nice sort of fluffy high frequency detail. So to get really advanced, you want to kind of use a combination of 2 of these. So this is where we can start to use MicroSolvers. So I'm going to leave that one on. In fact, let's turn this one off so we can see the effect. I'm going to go inside here. So inside here, we can add what's called MicroSolvers. If you hit tab and type gas disturb, you'll see we get a gas disturb node. Let's plug it in. And this is the same as the one above. We can add multiple noises here. First thing you've got to make sure is your time scales match. The rotational forces look quite good. And again, we can use a control field here of speed. So we'll match that to the other one as well. This said 2 here, and we put this roughly about there. And it's using, it's disturbing the velocity field, and we can actually manipulate what fields we disturb. But since we're using the minimal solve, we must turn this on. So if I don't turn that on, you'll see it's really slow because suddenly it's now not doing the minimal solve. But if I turn this on, this is able to join into the minimal solve, and now it goes quick again, and we can see the effect of this node. I'm inside the network here, that's why the shading looks funky. But this one I'm going to have on continuous. Let's put that to 50 again, and let's come out of that node. And you'll see we get that crunchy continuous noise that we want, which is pretty handy. So out here, I'm actually got my disturbance here. I'm going to set this back to block based, and we're going to have sort of that big noise, but less of it. So I'm going to create some of that swirly big shapes, but then these high frequency noise on top. There we go. And that gives us a really interesting effect. And you can go in there and add more and more multiple noises on top to give yourself some very interesting noises. It's all the noises that really sell this. And you can do other microsolvers, for example. We could do a gas wind. So you just simply merge these together. And this is how you really start to customize this effect without going into proper DOPs. So again, time scale needs to be matched. We'll have this blown across the -Z. So we'll put -1 in the Z there. And we'll leave the wind speed maybe at 1.2. See the effect of that. So there you go. That one doesn't like the OpenCL minimal solve thing because already it slowed it down. But you can see it's blowing it. Let's make that a bit stronger just so we can see the effect. So yeah, if you're doing the minimal solve, that one's not really going to help you. But look, you can see it's blowing it. Remember, you're only using the minimal solve to develop a look. These other solvers, let me just disable that. They would all work when you did a proper final cache out. So you could add it for your final cache. So shredding's a good one. Let me turn that off. The shredding adds a lot of noise here to the flames. See, it works on the flame, it uses the flame field. So it adds all the initial noise in your flames there, which then will create some nice velocities for your smoke. So you'll notice we still get some nice, let me start from frame 1 in case you don't believe me. We get some nice detail anyway from the shredding, which will come through. And again, that's based on the block size. The pulse length is how quick it changes over time, and you can use a control field if you want. And look, it creates a nice disturbance for us to begin with. Oh, hang on, we've still got our disturbance inside, haven't we? That's right. I forgot about that. Let's turn this one off so we can just see the noise that shredding creates on its own. So we haven't got much shredding there. I wonder why it's creating such noise. Let's put something like 20 in. Wait for the next explosion. And you'll see where it's hot, we've got a lot of nice noise. There you go. See, it's looking a bit more crunchy there now. We're not seeing that soft blobbiness in the initial flame here. And again, as it turns into smoke, we'll see some detail in there, a little bit more detail here. So again, we can make the block size maybe a bit smaller. See a lot more noise in. It stops it rising so much because you've got a lot of noise in there now. So I'm going to bring the shredding down, turn back on my disturbances. And what I'm going to do actually is make it a bit more buoyant. So when it blows, explodes here, we get the smoke rising up a bit more. The turbulence just adds general turbulence to the world. So you could do that if you wanted. So there we go. If we leave that maybe to 100 frames, you can see that explosion evolve a little bit longer. So you see it's really nice, these controls all bubbled up, and you've got a nice initial source there. You've got a nice control over your smoke and your flames and everything like that. We can see the flames rising through the bottom. And there's a few other settings and stuff which we're not going to go through at the minute. Now, the other nice thing I want to show you is the new way of shading this. This looks really quite nice in the viewport. In fact, let's just up the resolution just to see. Let's go 0.05. Let's go back to frame 1. And then press play, see how slow it goes now. I might run out of memory, GPU RAM, because I'm broadcasting as well, which is quite heavy. So yeah, let's see if that kicks in. So I did in my test before, but then again, I wasn't trying to screen share at the same time. So let's put this back to 08, maybe something like that will do. There we go, we can do that. Much higher resolution this time. And you'll see we get a much better fidelity in the viewport. I should save really, shouldn't I? After a scare like that. And you'll see the higher the resolution, I can make smaller noise features that we'll see. We're avoiding those sort of typical artifacts. So let's talk about the new shading that we've got here and rendering this stuff, which is always the good bit. So we now have a new volume bake node and a new, a bake volume node and a new way of shading Pyro in 18.5. On the simple fireball here, you can go to the look and adjust some of the look here. So you can get rid of the density and do some stuff here. But like I said, I'm not that interested in that. I just want to make it move the way I want. When it comes to the shading, I use this new node, and this new node is connected to the shader that you're actually going to render with. Let me turn this on. It doesn't look good for the moment. And again, we can use quick setups here, which will create other networks, including a full lighting setup for us, or we can initialize this. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to explain the settings as always for you. So first we can adjust the density scale, get rid of it if you didn't want it, or put it to a similar value that we had in the look here, which is 15, maybe 10. And obviously we can change the color of that as well. And then we can change the shadow density. That's a good one. That just makes the shadows darker and makes it seem thicker. So we can choose a nice sort of thick density there. Now this node is quite slow to process on heavy sims, so you can limit the resolution up here just for display. So we could do sort of 60, 64. Let me jump forwards a frame. 8, is that going to demo it for me? No, it's not doing it. It used to demo it for me, but it doesn't want to do it now. But you can limit the resolution there. That's annoying. So if you've got a slow GPU, you can limit it if you want with that number. Now, the way to make this look good is we want to see some fire. So we turn the fire on and we can see the fire field through our volume. Now, the fire field by default isn't great because it's just uniform everywhere. The real trick to this, and what we used to do back in the day, was you used to use other fields as masks. So you'd use other fields to cut holes and hide detail. So what I want to do is bring some of the density back over this fire field, and we can do that here with this enable mask. That's going to use the density field as a mask for the flames. And you'll see now, we see the flames hidden inside the smoke, because at this point they were hidden inside the smoke. You can actually adjust the mask. If you put higher numbers here, you'll allow more of the smoke to come through the mask, and lower numbers will obviously clip it for you. And the mask width is kind of softening that relationship as well. It's quite hard unless you've got a high value there. And you can also adjust the mask ramp here. So black's cut it out entirely. So if I select the black here and put in a higher value, I'm not going to cut out it entirely, and you'll see we're seeing a lot more coming through. And you can adjust that ramp manually if you want, and really control how much of the fire you see through the smoke. So the other thing this shader does is not just the fire in the smoke. It does, well, if we have fire in the smoke, the fire's going to illuminate the smoke, and we call that scattering, where the light gets scattered from the fire into the actual smoke itself. And that's what this second tab does. If we turn on scatter, you'll see this flames now cast light within the smoke. And again, you know, that might be the look you're after. If it's too bright, you can bring down the brightness scale here. We'll leave it on the default, bring it right down, which almost turns it off. And you can blur the effect. It's basically sampling the flame field like we did before, and then just averaging it and blurring it a bit. And you can adjust the blur here if you want. And again, with the mask, if you bring that value down, you'll clip it more. If you bring that value up, you'll see more of the scatter illuminating the internals of that, which gives you some really nice sort of details going on there. Let me put this to maybe 0.15. And my smoke, let's go back up to our 15. So we can see that all through there. Now, the other thing about this nice shader is we should really render it. So if I go back now and press play, you'll see it's not able to display every frame. It kind of jumps. That's because this node is trying to play catch up. So if I just display that frame, you'll see we get really, really nice detail coming through now. So let me just play a few more frames, and then let's have a look at that again. You see, you know, that really nice density detail on the top there. It looks really, really good. So we play forwards a few more frames, see what that one looks like. And of course, you know, when you render it out, that's what you're going to get, and you can fine tune that. Got really nice sort of small scale features and detail going on there, which is what you always want in heavy pyro. There's our second explosion kicking off underneath there. So again, let's look at that through our pyro bake. And that's all illuminating everything underneath again. So to render this, we have made a camera and a light. What I'm going to do is, let's make a mantra node. Let's go render node mantra PBR. That's a good render engine to use. So to speed this up, I'm not going to use ray traced various anti-aliasing. I'm going to bring down the pixel samples, which will just speed it up a little. And then the limits here, again, we can bring those down. Again, that will speed up our rendering for testing. And I'm going to make the res a bit smaller as well. So I'm going to look in my render view here, and I'm going to hit render. Now, what's important is this is all done in the ACES color space. You'll see I've got ACES turned on here. To turn on ACES, you need to go to the Houdini environment file in your home account. And obviously, you need to download ACES first. And then you need to set the environment variable. And look, there's our flame in our background there. It looks quite nice in Mantra. Maybe we can make that a little bit bigger, 2/3 the volume. Now, there's a nice trick with this. What you don't want to do is turn on diffuse limits. Turning on diffuse limits will get this, hopefully, to cast some light. Look, there we go. We're getting some light emitted from this. Now, this is accurate, but really slow because you need a lot of samples. There is a quicker way of doing the same trick, getting that to illuminate the scene. So let me go back up here and actually turn off the spotlight. Ooh, let me select it, say disable. So now if we render, I'll just dim that again. So yeah, now we've got no diffuse bounces. You'll see it kicks in a default headlight actually, Mantra. So if we go to, where is it? It's in objects down here, default headlight, turn that off. There we go. So we get some of our scatter, but there's no light being emitted. One way to emit light is to go to rendering limits and turn it on a diffuse bounce, and then we'll get some diffuse light coming off here. But again, you'll need a lot of samples to make that smooth. So a different way is to actually create a volume light. So if you click on volume light, you can select your volume and hit enter. And we only want the volume light to affect the ground. We don't want it to illuminate the volume itself because our fake scattering is doing that. So for that, we can use the light linker. If I make a new pane tab type here called light linker, I can select my volume light and say just affect the grid here, not the actual explosion. That will speed it up as well when it comes to render. The other thing is you need a few samples here. Let's put 32 in. So if I go to render now, let me keep that as a snapshot. So render now, we should see this volume light faking illumination from the actual volume. So it will get the same colors based on your sim and the flickering and stuff. And it should be quicker to get a smoother render with less samples. So there we go, that's rendering in. And if we look here, you'll see it looks a little bit smoother. But the advantage of that is if we just go to, as usual here, and we put in something like 4x4 samples, then it'll be a lot smoother down here. Whereas with the diffuse ones, it would be a lot harder. You'd still get noise. You'd have to have 6, 8, 12, much higher values. So again, we can help improve that by increasing the samples here. Let's put 64 in. I have to stop the render and re-cache them. You'll see here it says it's doing the samples up here. There we go, point cloud. That's what we're generating, the point cloud into memory. That's how it's faking the lighting. And this does cast shadows and everything. So you've got an object there, the shadow will be cast on it. So you get a really nice lighting coming off that, and you'll see it's a lot smoother. So just for speed, let's bring this back down to 2x2. And I'm going to add an environment light, an HDR. So one of the default ones here from the, if we just click on there, click HDRI, use the default one that comes with Houdini. And again, if we just stop and generate our new cloud, you'll see we'll get an outdoor illumination with that lighting on there. And this looks really nice. So just give it a second to kick in. I'm going to put a clay shader on the floor here, actually. Let's make a principled material here. Principled shader. I'm going to choose in the presets here, clay. And I'm going to set the reflectivity to 0. Otherwise, it'll be a bit slow to calculate. We'll just drag that onto the floor here. And that should kick in for us. There we go. So now we've got a brown ground, which look a bit better. And we'll just process around here. You see, it's nice. You can left click and it will process under your mouse for you. Looked better when it was darker, didn't it? At night time. So these little squares are called tiles. Now, depending on your memory and how fast your processor is, sometimes making those tiles can be bigger can be quicker and more efficient. So what I'm going to do is on the output node here is we can go to render, and here's the tile size. Let me wait for that to finish. So there was it without the lights. Lights on, lights off, lights on, lights off. There we go. Let me make another snapshot. So if I do 32, we'll actually get bigger tiles, and that can speed up the render sometimes. That can make it go a bit quicker. What I do want to do actually is just stop that frame. Let's go to a later frame, see what frame 69 looks like. Just give the GPU time to catch up there. We'll render the new frame. Obviously, you want to cache this stuff out to disk, but that will take a lot of time and a lot of disk space. So we've had a little brief look at the Pyro source node and how we can control that and create a carpet bombing effect or a radial bomb or however you want. Then we looked at how we can change the sourcing of that. And it's you want to fade stuff off and keep a lot of noise in there and add interest to it. And that's what makes a good explosion, sort of source of a good explosion. And then we went through very briefly all the settings in the new Pyro node, the sourcing and stuff, particularly using this minimal solve to fine tune a look really, really quickly. As you saw, I was able to hit play and start to get all the noises I want all within this short hour. So if I was just doing play blasts or flip books with the sparse solver, as quick as it might be, I still probably would have done 2 or 3 in this time, and we wouldn't even be close to a look that I was trying to get. So that's the advantage of this new workflow. You know, it really, really speeds up your iterations. Like I said, I want to do this webinar because I think these tools are really, really cool and will allow people to get very, very creative very fast. And as you saw, it's really, really easy to set up in the SOP network. You know, I didn't even have to build a proper DOP network, really. I just went in a little bit and I showed you how you can do MicroSolvers. And that's the kind of level of control you'll want, you know, is to add the kind of shapes and noises that you want to see. So the trick is to get it to move right first and then worry about the shading and detail later. Obviously, a good source to begin with really helps. So there you go. That looks interesting. So you see we've got a few frames there of it evolving. Obviously, it'll take too long for me to render here for you. So let me save that frame. So let's go back to frame 1. So we get an early frame. Oh yeah, there's one last thing I want to talk about, the shading actually. Yeah, that's the bake volume kicking in there. Let's go to frame 35. We've still got a couple of minutes. So in the last couple of minutes, I just want to talk about shading models. I mentioned we use the ACES color space for the Pyro. So you really should have that installed to see the proper colors. But you can control the colors on the Pyro bake here through this color ramp. So we're controlling the colors for the fire and the scatter. So they should match up to each other. And it's how we look up the colors based on the flame field, you know, the heat, basically. So the cool stuff is at this color and the hot stuff is at this color. And you can change the range here. There is a way to visualize the ranges, and, which I do go through in another advanced tutorial. But they're generally normally in the ranges of 0 to 1. So we're using the color ramps. You can put your own custom colors in here. For example, you could use a funky ramp like this. That's just for my fire, not the scatter, so that we may not see that. Remember, the fire's inside. If I do it for the scatter as well, then they'll both tie up. So black body is kind of the black body colors we want anyway, but not really, a little bit funky. Or we could do an infrared one, look, rainbow colors. Let's do infrared here. A really interesting looking effect. Maybe not what you want. And let me just undo those, go back to salmon colors, as we like to call them. There we go. And then we've got these other models. We've got a physical black body. So the ramp is obviously an artistic one, but the physical black body is using physics. Look, it's got the same temperatures we had in the sim. So as it cools down, this should be more physically accurate, allegedly. So that's a physically accurate model. We'd have to go back and see some earlier flames. Let me go back to where some earlier flames were. Let's try that frame. And there's 2 physical lighting models actually in this version now. We've got the black body one. So you want to make sure the ranges are set the same, and then this is physically accurate. But again, we want it to be a creative tool so we can control it. but when it's hotter, it's brighter. So you can control this. You can make it seem hotter by, again, increasing the base temperature here. Let's just get that to reevaluate. So if I put a 10 in, we'll see it gets a lot brighter down in this area. And we'll see see the whites peaking. We're pushing it too far. I'm getting artifacts. There we go. Bring that back down. And you can obviously generally scale it with the scale here. So I could bring that up. And that will also, if you want to see a render region, you can hold Shift, left click and drag, and then it will just render that little region for you. So Shift, left click and drag, and it will just render that region. Let's put that back to 1. And the other lighting model we have is Planck Black Body. If you turn that one on, it's got a very different number range, and you'll see it burns out immediately. So you want to put this down to 1. And the same with the scatter. Let's put that to 1 and put this also to Planck. So this is more physically accurate than the other one, more photographic. You see it looks really hot there. And it's up to you which lighting model you ultimately choose. It doesn't really matter. You know, the ramp gives you full control. And I think these tools were designed around the ramp, really. But you can use physically accurate ones if you want to. So look, it's doing all the correct colors based on your actual sim. So if you wanted it to get cooler, you'd have to change the sim. Whereas with the artistic control, you can just make it the colors you want and not worry about the sim. So you can work with the idea of make it move how you want first, then shade it afterwards. So there we go. You can see how the Planck's changing over time from that bright to this darker. Make that a bit bigger, the region. So again, it's up to you which shading model you want. So if we go back to physical black body quickly on both tabs, see how that looks now. It's all darkened down a bit. Let's jump forwards a few more frames. And you see the look development of this is really, really fast with this new workflow. You know, what you see is what you get. It is close to what's in the viewport there. Maybe I need to go to some later frames. We need some flame in there. So there you go, it's jumping through 50, 62. So much faster with the minimal solve working. And I've got an old GTX 1060. So if you've got one of those new funky, super fast cards, then this will be, oh, look, it's not bright enough. That's why we're not seeing it. We left the scale at 1 here. It needs to be 250. Need to put that back to 250. It's only the Planck is down at 1 there. These need to be up high. Otherwise, we just turn down. There we go. Now, the thing about the physical black body is you'll see the temperature goes all red quite up high. You can fix that with tone mapping. The adaption fixes the low end, the reds. So if you want less reds, put 0.1 in, and that will get rid of the reds for you. So let's also do that on there. So we're clipping off the reds. So put 0.05 in on both. And the burn makes the bright areas hotter. So this, again, is taking it out of the realms of physical accuracy, but it's giving you the level of control that you want. So that we got rid of the reds up there, but we've still got a bit of the brightness in there. Let me jump forwards to frame 1 and go early on again just to see the difference. So remember, buoyancy and temperature make it rise up. If you want it to go more plumy, you use the shaping to add noise to change the look for yourself if you want. So look, it's still hot there with the black body one. And the idea is to get all this lovely crunchy detail in there and some interesting sources to begin with. So I think we've got a minute or two for any questions. If anybody's got any questions, do you want to type them in the Q&A box? Any questions about Pyro or Houdini or the course? Obviously, if you want to learn more about Houdini from me, you can come on our Houdini course, where I obviously teach Pyro, procedural modeling, how to make assets, and lots of other really, really cool stuff. Yes, and we're planning some more webinars in the future as well, so keep your eyes out if you want some more quick tips like these as well. Okay, then, well, if there's no other questions, hopefully you've seen the potential of Houdini. As you know, you can download Houdini for free to play with. Anonymous has asked, what's an accurate way to find the ranges for shading? Okay, very quickly, I'll show you where the visualizers are. So on this node, in the actual Pyro solver, it's slightly different, but on this node, you can come here and you can show and hide temperature. So look, there shows you the temperature field on the side there. And if you click on modify, it brings up a visualizer where you can adjust the range. So look, there's the range of 1. So we can see we're peaking in the red here at the 1s. Let me turn off the lighting so it'll be easier to see which side is better. Just want to disable the lighting a bit. There we go. So we can find out what the ranges are. So if I increase this, we'll see it's just peaking there at 1.1. So if we run through the sim, you can see what values we've got. So at the hottest here, it's about 1 or 1.1 is my, what's this? What was this one? Temperature. So if you want to, you can hide temperature, and then you can show and hide flame, which will come out on the other side here. And again, you can modify the flame and see the ranges in the flame. So it's using a black body that time. I like the infrared myself. And I can see that my hottest in the flame here, again, is about 1.2. And we could evolve the sim and see what values we've got in the flame field. So these visualizers are really good. And you can obviously see both at the same time, either side. So this is why you want them different colors, so you know which is which. But you've got different visualizers here. So infrared. So this one is the flame. This one's the temperature field. So then you know roughly the numbers you want for the shading in your Pyro bake volume. As you saw, they roughly do stay around the values you want. The reason they stay for that is because in the Pyro burst source in components here, we're not scaling them. They're going between 0 and 1 anyway. If you scale them up here, then you're going to get values between 0 and 2. And then in there, your shading values will be higher. So yeah, it's all down to your Pyro source here, the numbers you're putting in first off. And again, if you scale them up in here, when they're coming in, this is when they're coming in. And then you've got the sim evolving as it goes. So yeah, you can just visualize them nice and easily like that. Hopefully that answered your question there. Let's turn the lighting back on because it looks much better. Looks much better in a render, as always. Excellent. Brilliant. So yeah, download Houdini, have fun, come to another webinar, or sign up to our course and learn how to do everything in Houdini. And all I want to say now, everybody, is to wish you a wonderful weekend, and we will see you all again soon.